Through the Noise with your host, Ernesto Glucksmann.
Jason, man, thank you for joining me on the show. Man, I was reading through your blog and I was like, every post I started thinking, wait, I got a question about that. And then the next post, I got a question about that. I got a question about that. It's just really interesting. And I would say probably complex, complicated, but maybe not complex world that you're in, right? This is, hey, everybody listening, thanks for jumping on. If you're on the YouTube channel, thank you. We don't have that many listeners. I know most of you have been listening to us over the years on the podcast, but the YouTube channel could use some love. So thanks you for that. This is CEO and founder of Gastrograph AI. You're Jason Cohen. Thank you for jumping in. You got the word gastro in there and you got AI, and that's what caught my attention to reach out to you. We're talking about flavors and you're using AI to figure some of this stuff out, right? How would you, Jason, kind of break it down to somebody who's not in your world, what your company does?
Well, first, thank you for having me. Really excited about this conversation. So what we do is, if you think about individuals around the world tasting food and beverage products, and let's say that you and I were to taste the same product, there could be differences in what I perceive, there could be differences in what you perceive. And what our technology does is it allows companies, food and beverage companies, trying to make products, new products, reformulate products. It allows them to understand what different target consumer groups, different demographics around the world, what different people are going to perceive in that product. And from that, predict preferences. So, we don't work on a personalization level. We've done work on a personalization level, but most of the time, right, we're not predicting for you. We're predicting for you and people like you. What's the distribution of what you're going to perceive? What's the preferences that are going to result from those types of flavor profiles?
Okay, let's break down, because you have some wonderful blog posts that are just using kind of like, I know you're not your clients, but they're examples of like what the world could be, right? And you were rating or trying to figure out the predisposition, let's just say, of like a certain set of like potato chip, products, hot Cheetos in particular, let's say in the Chinese market, like which one of a set of products might work best in a specific region of the country. So can you give us a sense of like, okay, well, first of all, how do you know what folks in in China what are their particular flavor profile preferences relative to what ours typically are? Like, how do you know there's a difference?
Great question. So we actually do that the hard way. We have been collecting data since 2009. We run our own large-scale consumer panels and consumer demographic surveys around the world. We've now done that in more than 26, soon to be 30 countries. And we take up regional preferences as well. So we'll do testing in multiple cities as we enter that. And so in 10 years, now 11 years, since 2009, we've built up the largest sensory data set of on-market consumer products that's ever been assembled. So what we can do with all that data, we're taking data on flavor, aroma, and texture. We're taking data on a variety of different products, whether coffee, cheese, chips, scotch, cognac, salty snacks, baked goods, confections, chocolates, anything that's ready to eat or ready to drink. And we push the boundaries on that quite a bit, like, for example, instant noodle soups. What we can do with that data is we can use it to revert to first parameterize the distributions of perceptions that exist in that market. So we can look at a specific country or a specific target consumer demographic and say, this is their sensitivities. This is what they're going to respond to this underlying sensory stimuli. And then once the AI learns that, we can then say, this is the result. We can reverse engineer the preferences that are driving that market. So we can actually say, well, hot Cheetos was the example. Hot Cheetos in China, that maybe that product's available, maybe that product's not available, but we can take a flavor profiled by anyone, translate that perception to the target Chinese consumer demographic, and then use our Chinese preference model to say this is how that product would perform amongst those consumers.
Man, okay. So to try to summarize what I think I understood you say is you are surveying ahead of time particular regions of the country. So let's say you're in Shanghai. We have a good understanding because we did a bunch of surveyed flavors. Does it come down to like you bring in a volunteer and you put like a nutty flavor and then you put something else and like what do you like that or do you not like that or on some scale or do you go through that step-by-step process?
We have our own custom sensory system. It's a mixed Thursdonian scaling and scaled attribute intensity model with a descriptive analysis component. And to explain a little bit about what that means, there's 24 broad spectrum flavor categories.
Okay.
So 24 flavor categories. Those are things like fruits, earthy, herbaceous, roasted, nuts and seeds. And my original research back at Penn State University when I started this company was how do you build a sensory system that totally encompasses gustatory flavor space, such that anything you taste you can put onto the system without any offloading, without any covariance, without any cascading effects in between interactions between the terms.
Like, are you saying distinct flavors? Like how many distinct flavors we could kind of collect?
Distinct categories, exactly. Okay. And so those categories are broad categories, right? Fruits has many different flavors, roasted has many different flavors, rich has many different flavors. And so you can go in and on our system, you can rank. You can say, I taste fruits at a 4 out of 5, or I taste fruits at a 1 out of 5. That's edge of perception, right? Like a hint of fruit, or 0 out of 5, not present. And then within fruits, you can then say, I taste specific flavors. So it's a modified form of kata, but you could say, I taste apple, I taste peach, I taste kiwi. And in fact, if you can give those sentiments. So you can say, I taste apple and it's neutral, I taste kiwi and it's positive, and I taste peach and it's negative, just with a few taps. And so we can very quickly build up quite a high resolution picture of what's in that product.
So I taste this wine, I taste a fruity note to it. Okay, well, what is there a strength in any of these actual, like it leans towards kiwi for whatever reason?
Yeah, so we don't ask for a strength of specifics. And the reason is because consumers are good at ranking overall, and they're good at some level of identification. Misidentification rates are about 15 to 20%, even for common flavors. But they are not good at the ability to parse through, well, I'm tasting raspberry, peach, and kiwi. The raspberry is strongest and the kiwi is weakest. That becomes much, much harder. The cognitive load in order to go through all of the flavors is too high. And so actually we use the AI itself in order to actually determine, we call it a decomposition, in order to decompose the overall flavor profile into the relative attribute intensities. So the AI can look at whatever you put in, right? Say you taste that wine and you say, I'm tasting a 3 out of 5 on fruits and a 2 out of 5 on dry and a 1 out of 5 on earthy, right? And everyone likes to talk about minerality in wine. So it's 2 out of 5 on mineral. The AI then goes in and depending on what you marked, it's able to say, actually, you're tasting you're tasting gooseberry, and the gooseberry is 3% of the flavor profile. Then you're tasting calcium, and calcium is 1% of the flavor profile, and it can do that very, very accurately.
Oh, because you know the ingredients that were in the particular product that they were tasting. So you're not asking them to find the ingredients or the intensity. You're more interested in, like, do they like it or they don't, right? In a sense.
We in many products, we know the ingredients, but in a product like wine, the ingredients actually would not be helpful in that exercise, right? Because no one's adding a raspberry flavor or calcium flavors or anything like that, right? It's just those are compounds that are in the grapes or results of the fermentation process. So we actually don't need the ingredients in order to do the flavor profile decomposition. We can determine the actual relative magnitude intensities of specific signatures because the AI has seen now hundreds of thousands of products that with or without those labels. So it, we always think there's two sides to the system. The first is being able to model what someone's going to taste because all preferences are built on perception. right? If you and I taste the same product, we may or may not perceive the same things. We may not have the same sensitivities. We might have different vocabularies. We might have different references that come from our experiences growing up. So we have to control for that before we can build a preference model. So once we know what someone's perceiving, then we predict their preferences.
Oh my God. Okay. So you're using AI just on the data collection of all these panels, surveying it to just to normalize the data into something that predicts well enough.
Correct.
Oh my God. Okay. Then somebody else comes around and goes, hey, we're thinking we're going to try to sell hot Cheetos. That's what I love hot Cheetos. We're going to try to sell hot Cheetos in China. Do you think it's worth the effort? Right. That's kind of is that one of the goals of why we would contract you? Like, can you tell me with some sense of accuracy whether this product in its current formulation is likely to be interesting enough for people to buy it?
We can't. We're careful to say, that we don't predict sales, and we don't predict sales because, we don't know the distribution.
You're not in control of this deal making, right? The cost of the bag of hot Cheetos might be astronomical. I don't know. Who knows? But whether they will actually like it.
Exactly. Will it be competitive? Will it be preferred? And we can go a step further than that, and we could say, what is driving preference, right? Is it the spiciness? Spiciness preferences here in the United States are very different than spiciness preferences in China. Is it the cheese flavor, right? Cheese is very much a new thing in China. Or is it something else? And what needs to be modified to make this product more preferred in that market? And sometimes they make those recommendations, and sometimes they don't, right? Sometimes it's not worth the cost of modifying the product.
Right. That's what I noticed in all the blog posts. You said like it could do even better if they'd added a little more this mineral or that thing or that type of flavoring based on like what the data that you have collected for the region that of the typical things that they particularly like. Right.
Exactly.
Oh my God. This is done for the customer. It's done programmatically. They're not actually having to go find the panels, do all the data collecting, and then check. This is like analytics or flavor profiles, essentially.
Exactly. And that's really the gain of the system, right? In order to do this previously, you had to do large scale consumer testing. You had to recruit panels from target markets. You had to design an experiment to test exactly what you wanted to know. But we always considered that snapshot data, right? That data may have been true and correct if you had a good experimental design with enough statistical power and results that allowed you to reject the null hypothesis or whatever, right? But that data couldn't be reused. It couldn't be built on top of. It couldn't be used to inform and update and train models that can make predictions about the future. And that's really what gave us the idea about this opportunity is how do we go from descriptive frequentist statistical hypothesis testing to how do we go to model building where data collection and running experiments actually has a positive ROI. Not just the ROI from answering a single question, but an ROI in that you can create better, more accurate information and predictive models over time. So that when you actually want to know something about the future, you have a trusted model that has proven to be true, has proven to be accurate about predicting what's going to happen next. If I take this action, if I launch this product, if I make this change in my formulation, what's going to happen in the consumer experience?
Right. Probably the realization that flavors are evolving in and of itself, right? I mean, 15 years ago, walking into a 7-Eleven, you wouldn't really find that many super spicy snacks. Now in the US, at least in some parts, at least where I live, there's a lot of really hot, super spicy stuff that's available to people. And so essentially, because those products are there and because people have been buying them over time, the flavor profiles of preferences have suddenly evolved, right? So coming in with an extra bland or something that kind of counter to that might not do as well, right? You have to be thinking through that.
That's exactly right. Repeat the flavor yields perceptual differences, which yields differences in preferences over time. And so people can become adapted to flavor, right? People are now more accepting of very spicy flavors. People can move towards or away from flavors because of repeat exposure. And, just as a very contemporary example, COVID-19 quarantines was the largest systemic shock to consumer behavior since rationing, right, in World War II. It changed what people were buying and consuming and drinking. If you think about sweet and carbonated soft drinks, which frequently do upwards of 25% of their volume on on-premise sales, right? Well, there was no on-premise. There were no, stadiums or theaters or ball games or concerts, and people weren't buying it. And we published a study in Eurosense 2020, or maybe that was 2021. Time blends together throughout the pandemic now. But Eurosense is a conference for sensory science. And we looked at whether or not COVID-19 was an accelerator of existing trends or a reversion to the previous preference state. And what we actually found was that it was both, right? Many things, particularly in things like, there was all this talk that people were going back to childhood foods, looking for comfort foods, looking for snacks from their childhood. That was true, although a lot of it was actually a removal of exploration, right? For pre-pandemic, everyone was in this exploratory mood. They were looking for new experiences. They were trying new products. Companies were coming out with many new flavors. And there was this big flywheel of individuals trying new things, gaining new experiences, gaining new preferences. All of that stopped when the pandemic hit, when people reverted to prior preference state, and they fell out of that exploratory, that exploratory mindset. And so that reversed some of the flavors. On the other hand, stuff like sour acidity, which was already a growing trend, that became more prevalent. And when you hear about people moving to things like sourdough, right, that is part of that larger trend towards more sour products.
Man, and so then that changes some of the data sets to test against. So do you get customers that come back and go, we've been doing pretty well, but are we going to continue to do well with this? Can we run another test, or can we run like a slight variation because we think we need to adjust the acidity in the product or something, right?
Yes. So on the macro level, we can predict usually about 2 years out. That's just for major flavor profiles. So that's things like sour acidity or fruitiness. For micro level trends, I have a really controversial view in the industry. A lot of companies will say, what's the trend? What's the trend? What's the trend? Talking about like, well, is it mango or is it pineapple this summer? Right. And my take on it is that everyone has it backwards. And trends don't matter, right? If you create a good product that people like, you'll create trends. This is talking specifically about micro level trends, right? Specific flavors. Like obviously, if sourness acidity needs to be increased because sugar is decreased in order to create a balanced flavor profile, that's a macro level. That's a real change in preference state. But these micro level trends, right? If we predict that you should create a product that tastes like lychee, and or that lychee is a nascent preference state and there's no products that are meeting that preference, we're not predicting that that's a trend, because we're not predicting that anyone will do that. And if no one does it, it will not trend.
Right.
But we're predicting that there is an opportunity, an unmet preference need, right? That you can take advantage of. And
right. Where's the niche that you could, the gap in the marketplace for the micro stuff? The grand macro, the big trends have to be monitored, but at the smallest level, you're really looking for gaps, something that's interesting, because people get bored with the same stuff over time, right?
People get bored. Different flavors come to the forefront. Exposure can happen through really interesting channels, right? I mean, you can have, if you look at the rise of Thai cooking in the United States, lemongrass didn't exist in the United States before Thai cooking. And now you can find Thai restaurants even in small towns in the Midwest, right? And that could be traced to immigration in the mid to late 90s. Grants by the Thai government, they said we're going to promote Thai culinary food to increase tourism and to increase the stature of Thailand internationally. and it worked. People moved to Thai people moved to the United States, opened up restaurants, promoted Thai food, and Thai food is now one of the most popular types of Asian cuisines. People go to Thailand specifically on culinary tours, and that was solely responsible for the introduction of lemongrass into the United States, and a lot of products that now taste like lemongrass. Most things don't have that clean of a story.
No, most things, it's a messy process that you have humans figuring out something, right, or accidentally stumbling on a flavor, right, or just finally convincing leadership to take a chance on adding some more spice to your Fritos, right? Who knew? Who knew hot Cheetos are so delicious? Anyway, I am a former addict of hot Cheetos. Let's just say. So that's why I thought that was hilarious to come across that post. So can we talk a little bit about the actual, like, you've been at this for, you said, about 10 years, working on the platform and working on, I mean, a lot of AI startups that are sort of flourishing right now, might get a couple of $1 million here and there in early seed funding to sort of get their feet going. But you've been at this for 10 years. What has been, like, let me ask this in two parts. What has been your greatest realization about AI as it pertains to the work that you do? And what is, like, the platform structure that you think about that would have been better if you knew that back in the day? So those two questions.
Those are great questions. That'll make a little more context in the story of the company. So I started as a professional tea taster. That is a real job. Spent a whole bunch of time in mainland China, Taiwan, Korea, and Japan.
Wait, you said tea taster?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Awesome.
If anyone's watching on YouTube, that's a full tea room behind me.
Oh, wow.
Prior career, but very much a personal interest. So I then went to Penn State University, where I started a tea research group that, like everything I touched, spiraled quickly out of control and became an interdisciplinary tea research institute called the Tea Institute of Tea. That was about exactly as popular as it sounds. Just really competed with the football team for funding and turnout. But despite that, I had 30 plus students in 5 fields of study. I did my research originally in sensory science, science of taste, and then moved to machine learning and artificial intelligence, and did that for just about 4 years. And when everything started to work, we could actually make predictions around what people taste and like and dislike in food and beverage products. Realized it didn't belong in academia, spun it out of the university. I hired off the top 3 researchers from my research institute, and we all started Analytical Flavor Systems together. So that research started way back in 2009, became a company in June 2013, then took about 2 years to go from research to a usable enterprise product. Officially raised some institutional capital in October 2016, moved the company to New York City, and we've been off to the races since. So, so yes, we've been doing this for a long time, but it was research for the first 4 years, and then product development, turning it in from research into a product for an additional 2 years. So we've really only been on market since 2016, and we really didn't hit our growth curve. We didn't really hit our stride until 2018. And the 2 biggest things I would say that we learned is, one is that bootstrapping is awful. Bootstrapping a company. It worked out fine for us, but I will never do that again. Right? Sell earlier, market stuff earlier, get investors earlier. It's not easy advice to follow. It's not, it's not an easy thing to do, right? But it probably would have accelerated our development. Probably would have brought that forward by a few years. We probably would have been able to hire up faster, staff up faster, and we would have probably had an iteration time. On the other hand, I always say that we never pivoted. We've never changed what we set out to do, right? Modeling perceptions and preferences to predict consumer responses and products. And some of the applications have changed. When we first started, we did a lot of work in the beer industry, and particularly the craft beer industry. We did some work on, like, quality monitoring, which we don't do anymore. but it was identical technology. When we officially launched, we got much more into product development than any type of manufacturing processes with the same technology. So, would that process of discovery have happened faster if we had sold the product earlier, if we had taken investment money earlier? I think so, but it's something that I have no way of testing that. I have no way of knowing if that's true. But I do know that if I ever start something again, if this company does well, exits, right, and I start something again, I will not bootstrap.
Right. I mean, most technology companies, like pretty hardcore tech companies at this point, they're absorbing $5 to $10 million, right, in initial, like a $2 million investment, which is crazy to even say, is bootstrapping in some capacities, especially when you're dealing with AI, right, and material. So it's just like the amount of technical expertise you'd need to be able to design and model and put this thing together. Just getting the data into the system in a structured manner that you can then work with is a huge challenge, right?
Exactly. And we raised our first real round was 4 million in 2018. We had raised quite a bit less than that in 2016. But I would also say that when we had started, it was a different time. When I started this research in 2009, no one was interested in food tech. Very few investors were interested in niche applications of AI. I don't really think of food as that niche, right? Everyone eats, but the thing
they do,
right? And back then, 2009 through 2016, 9 years, right? It took 9 to 10 years of additional growth in the market. The majority of investment funds in AI were flowing to things that were either slim layers or things that were generative buildups that could be used across multiple markets. They were not highly specific targeted applications of AI. That happened later, and the expertise was still much less in demand, right? You didn't have individuals being poached from research labs or from universities, with $500,000 plus, if not more, salaries. So, we started really at the forefront of niche applications of AI, building an AI that only does one thing. It's flavor, aroma, and texture, perception, and preference. Right? That's it, right? We don't know that the AI does not know anything about marketing, branding, supply chain, distribution, price point. It only knows consumer sensory perception and response. And now that's not so shocking, right? But like every overnight success is 10 years in the making, is what they say.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. The research phase that you were in, I mean, what were you really researching at that point? It's like, how do we actually categorize all this stuff?
It went through different phases. Mm-hmm. So very early days, it was, how do you build the sensory system? How do you collect the data? How do you make the data? How do you structure the data? And tons of testing just went into seeing, can we predict verifiable ground truths on the data that we collect? Can I predict where this coffee is from, what country this coffee is from? Can I predict the cultivar of the coffee? Can I predict the age of the consumer? Can I predict the gender of the consumer who gave us this observation? Those are all verifiable ground tests, right?
Wow, you can predict the age of the consumer on your data set.
Yes.
Just based on how they respond to the certain flavorings.
Yes.
Oh my God. So, and that's like kind of your proof of concept for it. Like, we're so good at, like, the system's so good that it can do this. It's not necessarily that they're at, well, maybe there are particular flavor products that are targeting certain age groups, right?
Oh, certainly. A lot of the work that we do in new product development, it could be, we want to target, post-yoga millennial women in the United States.
Because we have this vegan product thing that's like, oh, okay, of course. This health and wellness.
So
new,
that's a brief. Yeah.
That's amazing. Let me ask you this. You've been 10 years into this. Have you always had this vision of this world? I mean, you certainly went to Penn State, right? And you did your research, so you were in this general direction, but did you envision you'd be here where you are right now with AI and with the work that you have?
No, it's been both. It's been both slower and faster than we imagined. It's been slower in that the uptake and the understanding of technology is slower, right? It's still very new. Every company wants to learn about it. Every company wants to run it through its tests and its paces. The adoption curve in the Western world for technology that changes processes is shockingly slow. And to compare that, we do a lot of work internationally. Actually, we do about 25 to 50% of our work in Asia, depending on the quarter. And
they're like, of course this stuff should work. Like, of course, they're more trusting that you're giving them the right information.
Exactly. So when we go into a company in the United States, particularly the United States, right? It's very much US and Europe. It's very much, how do I know it works? Can you prove to me that you can make these predictions? Can we run a pilot test? Can we, what other publications that you have? What other companies are using this, right? Some questions, I mean, now at this point, these are all questions we have answers to. It's fine, right? It might eat anywhere from a few weeks to a few months in order to get started.
The sales cycle, right? Okay.
The sales cycle, right? And just running the test to prove to them, right, that we can operate on their product or their product category. When we operate in China, we do not get those questions. In China, it's very much if they're like, okay, great, we're not concerned about the AI, we're not concerned about the predictability, right? If we go from 60 products today to 600 products next year, will you be able to handle that? What's the operational load if we want to make, instead of 5 predictions per week, if we want to make 50 predictions per week or 500 predictions? Oh my
God, that's the din you're getting from the clientele in China.
Yeah. And so the conversations are very, very different.
What the hell? Like, I mean, that's surprising to hear. I mean, it's probably just on the sheer bulk that everybody gets their stuff made in China, right? The whole world does, that they have to consider they don't even have time. They're just scaling and, issues there. It's what it sounds like. But it also means that they just are much more trusting that the technology does as advertised than we are, which means deal making is happening faster, which means you start to question the United States' ability to innovate in a sense, right?
In a sense. There are, in the United States, the average consumer's interaction with AI is very hidden, right? You interact with it using some things on Facebook and Google, right? Is it real AI? Is it important AI, right? That's a different debate. But the interaction with the majority of the AI in the US and in the Western world is very hidden. In China, you walk into a building and the cameras scan your face and it determines whether you're allowed to enter, right? It takes me forever to get into a building in China because my face isn't in the database. I have to go and show my passport and stuff, right? My Chinese colleagues walk right
through.
Right? They use AI for much more public-facing things. The average consumer in China has more interaction with AI than the average consumer in the West. And that means that not just the young people, but the executives, the managers, from the
they're used to
packaging line work all the way up to the C-suite are used to it, and they've seen it in other industries, they've seen it in their industries, and they're looking for any competitive advantage. There's none of the skepticism around, will AI affect my industry? Will it affect what I need to do day to day? And so it's very much not about prove to me that it works. It's very much how quickly can we adopt it and how well will it work?
Man, that sounds like there's profound implications then for like our role in the world with technology in general, right? But maybe on the other hand, our hesitancy a little bit. Like, I don't necessarily want to get scanned to walk into every building, right? But that's a very typical Americanized perspective on, privacy concerns and so forth, right? Like, that's a common one. But on the flip side of all this, it is kind of surprising and concerning to hear that, like, AI, like, that your time to get to the, so much of we run a business here. So much of the business effort goes into the proposal, the discussions beforehand, and so forth. And I've worked with folks in Mexico, and in their part, you have to, you have to go to dinner. If you're going to make a big deal, you have to sit down, you have to have breakfast. There's a lot of more feeling things out before actually engaging. And they'd like to say that in America, it's like very much like, oh, you can do this. Okay. Yeah. Check. Here's the order. Here's the proposal. But I don't think that. I'm like, what you're telling me about China is like, it's just like, let's go with AI, period. Full stop right there. Wow.
Yeah. That's not to say that all contracting and that all operations and all sales are easy in China. Certainly.
No, right? Of course not.
To say that the questions are very different and the areas of concern are very different.
Right. Wow. Do you, okay. So let me think here. Where do you see this business that you're in? I mean, clearly most of your clientele is coming from Asia in a sense, a growing portion of it. Or do you feel like you're going to eventually get into much bigger, clientele here in the US? There's just a lag for them to catch up.
I'd say neither. So where we work and where we operate is pretty complicated, right? We could have an American headquartered company that has development and research centers in Europe that wants us to work on a new product for Thailand, right? So is that an American company? Is it a UK company? Is it a Thai company?
These
right?
Are giant companies pulled into whoever hears about your product.
Exactly. Right? So our revenue, like I said, is probably 40-50% US, maybe anywhere 15 to 20 South America, 15-20 Europe, and the rest is Asia. So Asia is not the majority, but it could be the largest area or competitive with the United States, depending on the quarter. And a lot of that, we are a U.S. company. We started here first, but we have one full-time team member in China. We have a team member in Hong Kong, team member in Singapore, partner company in Japan. We've also had representation in Thailand previously. So, we do quite a bit of deployment and work, even for European and American companies in Asia. Where I think the business is going. So I think that this is very much a good thing, is that I think that it used to be that companies would try to sell one product locally, right? You can think of massive soda brands, massive beer brands, same product available around the world. Now, and in some countries there used to be local competitors, right? Peru had Inca Cola. India has Thumbs Up, which is a Coke competitor. And so what we're seeing now, though, is we're seeing new products, either by the multinationals or by local companies, that are creating highly targeted products that are fit for a specific group or a specific area, right? Even in the United States, you can see that. For a long time, we've had really, really niche products that are regional products, right? Like cheer wine in the Carolinas goes great with Carolina barbecue, right? But that was a legacy product that remained in a very constricted geographic area. Now what we're seeing products that are geared towards California, products that are geared towards Texas, products that are geared towards the Midwest or the Northeast or the Southeast. That type of regionalism is very new. And even beyond the regionalism, the attempt to appeal to specific consumer demographics, whether it's Hispanic Americans in the United States, or African Americans in the United States, or even certain groups of Asian Americans in the United States, that's very new. And I very much see that as more diverse products for a more diverse world. How can we get products into consumers' hands that they're going to love? right? There's no reason that I need to be eating or drinking the same things as everyone else if those products don't speak to me or don't appeal to me, right? So historically, the entire CPG world, the entire food world was built on creating mass market products that everyone likes. Now it's about how do you build portfolios of products and brands that specific target consumers are going to love. And they're going to love it more than any of the other products that they could choose at a similar price.
Yeah, so you do well in a specific, do super well in a specific region, but your supply chain that you can control or get the supply chains and the product delivered there. I mean, it gets super complicated at that point, right? It's like the complexification of everything. Can I get a bespoke product for this particular region based on the ingredient access that we have and the manufacturing process that we have versus like, hey, we made this thing that's really sells really well here in this part of the world. Let's see where else we can sell it, right? I find that the most fascinating part of the food world evolution. It's like you don't go into the milk section anymore and just buy like the whole milk or the low fat milk. There's a bunch of other milks that are in there. And when you look at the ingredients of all that other stuff, it's super complex. It's not so simple. I would assume for a lot of these big food manufacturers to deliver on such a variety of products, right? This is the evolution of computer animated just-in-time sales, the production process, all of it being put into it. And it's then, I guess, it's companies like you that are now been positioned to be able to more almost real-time test to see if we're making an assumption, putting together a product for a particular region, go to you, Jason, and be like, what do you think? Will this do well if we made this? Right?
Exactly.
Wow. What's the AI technology stack that you guys work? I mean, in 2009 when you started, or
2009.
AWS wasn't quite there with their stuff. Like, what do you guys, what do you anchor on with your systems? Just curious.
Yeah, so, all of the original research, right, back in university and stuff, that was all model building. And so very little was done on hosting or software development or anything. So by the time we started 2013 with software development, that was all on AWS.
Okay.
The models, a lot of companies, most of the companies that claim to be machine learning or AI companies aren't. And of the ones that are, right, the majority are using either pre-built models or pre-built model architecture, things like Keras, TensorFlow, Spark, LibML, NiFi. And, if there are companies out there and they can pump their data into logistic regression and get meaningful results, amazing, more power to them. There are companies out there that have terabytes of data and need deep neural networks, trained on GPUs by TensorFlow and served up on TensorServe. Amazing, more power to them.
Great.
Right? That's not us.
That's not you guys. You have a unique model that's been mapped from the start.
Exactly. So we build all of our own models from scratch in R. We run the open source metric learning package in the R programming language. The majority of our work is topological in nature, building meaningful pairwise distance metrics in high dimensional non-Euclidean space.
This is where you're going to lose some of my audience, but that's okay. We don't have to talk too much.
Well, and it's actually very, very intuitive, right? Because it's like what that means, like when someone's making a lemon soda, right? No one is squeezing lemons into that soda. So you can't talk about, how much lemon juice. You can't talk about, and it doesn't even, you can't talk about how many lemons or how much lemon juice. So, then you say, okay, well, it's lemon flavor. What about the intensity of the lemon compounds, right? Well, actually, you're going to have fermented lemon 2, Givaudan lemon 5, Symrise lemon 10, right? Tons of different lemon flavors that can achieve that. And those lemon flavors are going to have different intensities at the same molarity, which means you can't talk about amount of lemon compounds. So what we do is we actually say, okay, well, lemon is a vector in flavor space. And movement along the lemon vector means that consumers taste more or less lemon. And that lemon vector could be parallel or covariant or slightly correlated with the citrus vector, the grapefruit vector, and the lime vector. And so by mapping out thousands of these vector spaces.
The thing that people call lemon are several different things,
yes,
is what you're saying.
Exactly.
But you're mapping it out, so you're capturing their preferences. They're likely to react, right, in any of those areas.
Yeah, and then we place each product in that high dimensional space, in that flavor space, and then we can learn the relationship between products.
Holy crap! So, would you license this model out? Would you then go to the tensor world and be like, here's the model that works really well? And
no,
that's such proprietary. Like, that's your 9 years of effort, lived effort.
Exactly.
Right.
It's the data that led to all of the models that we build on top of it.
And that's your competitive edge to anybody else perhaps doing something similar in your particular space. This is the research.
Yeah, exactly. They would need both the longitudinal data, they would need the experience of working with the data, and then they would need to build models on top of the transformed data. So we would say that we have a pretty good competitive moat, right? Not a perfect competitive moat. There's of course areas under which we are very keenly aware that groups can attempt to compete with us, right? Some of the most common ones are hardware. I'm not a believer in hardware for human sensory perception. We've had HPLC and GCMS. We've known exactly what's inside products since the mid 1950s or early 1960s. Right? It's never been predictive of perception. There's groups that are trying to do biosensors, right? Response with ganglia or perceptual work, G protein receptor sites, those types of things.
That's different though. That's a different even direction, right?
It's a different direction, and we don't really believe it's competitive with us, right? It's not, if they were, we joke, right? Like, someone has asked us in the past, what is the AI? Whenever someone asks that, I always want to say, it's brains. We're growing brains in vats and giving them, right? But the groups that are doing biosensors, right? That's quite literally what they would need to do in order to be able to get full spectrum perceptual responses. So I don't really quite believe in that. But there are other things, right? Like, we don't do work on the behavioral side. We don't do work on people who watch certain TV shows or attend certain sporting events or go to certain activities, right, like yoga. We don't do behavioral side work right now, and so that's an area of open competition with us.
Well, maybe they could license your part of it, use and then they do the actual behavior part, adding to it, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that could be a future.
It definitely could be. So but no, we wouldn't license the core model.
The core model, you wouldn't actually create the model, like, here, copy the model into the right. It's come talk to us. Forget the exit. I mean, why not head towards potential future IPO? Like, why not get to this level? Because if this is working and you're 10 years ahead with what probably other, I don't know anything about your space, so I wouldn't even know who's a competitor, but why not? Is that door possibility out there for you guys? Is that what you're?
It could be. I mean, we're certainly not thinking of exits right now. We're doing well. We're in the earliest stages of our gigantic hockey stick inflection. Like, things are right now quite good. So we're certainly not thinking of an exit. When I think of something like an IPO, which is certainly a few years in the future, who knows what the market looks like at that time. But looking at it right now, right, I think what we do is relatively difficult to understand, particularly from a corporate, from an institutional investor side, right, a public company's money market institutional investor side.
There's a bottleneck there, right, in a sense. Okay.
And I would assume that we would trade at a lower PE ratio than similar AI tech companies or AI tech companies in other industries.
So you are looking, you're kind of keeping an eye on what's happening with Tesla. You're looking at what happens with maybe 23andMe. You're sort of looking at Palantir.
Yeah. And those companies, right? If we could achieve what those companies are achieving, that'd be very attractive, right? But realistically, if we look at other companies in the space, whether they are flavor house companies, whether they are suppliers, right, or producers of ingredients, or other industry service providers for CPG, those tend to trade at a price discount to standard PE ratios, partially because it's not an area where the analysts and the big banks and the investment firms spend a lot of time and effort. So if we could change that, then an IPO could be very attractive. Maybe running a public company less so.
Right. That's a whole other conversation on that one, right? But yeah, I just think that for most, like, I think we're getting past the stage of like, oh, AI, that's an amazing thing. Do you do AI too? And now really digging under the levels of what that actually incorporates, and it's just much more complex. And so when people start to peel back the onion on what that all means, that's when they quickly run aground into like, I don't know enough about what all this is. But, do I know enough to be able to distinguish the product value that you have, the model that you have, from what somebody else is telling me? Like, yeah, we do AI too on our system. What do you need? That kind of approach, right? That part, perhaps it's taking time, but maybe in the next few years, maybe in the next generation of decision makers that are filling in these executive spots at some of these food manufacturing places are going to be more prepared to be able to understand the value, right? So, man, thank you so much. That was an hour. That just flew by, Jason. If somebody out there in the food industry, I know there's a couple for sure that listen to the show, that are just curious about this, want to find out more, where should they go? About your
our website is gastrograph.com. Company is Analytical Flavor Systems. Product is Gastrograph AI. All of our email addresses and everything are gastrograph.com. That would be great. Very happy for them to reach out. We have tons of public-facing technical white papers. We have tons of internal technical white papers, for once conversations become more serious. We take a very strong stance that the AI must be explainable, right? A lot of companies say, look, we have this magical black box AI, trust us, right? And I don't recommend that you do.
But they have to set aside the time to talk to you. Like, they have to truly be somebody that has to be there to want to sit down with you to go through it if they want, right?
If they want to.
If they want to. Right.
Yeah. Right. Because we take the stance that it has to be understood in order to be trusted, and it has to be trusted in order to be used. So we're not going to give away the algorithm, but we will explain exactly what's going on, how it works, why it works, how it's possible, what our proof is, what tests we run to validate it.
And the potential outcomes for them to get it right. I mean, it could mean millions of dollars. So, getting a product into one locality, especially if it's something overseas. I mean, I can't even imagine what the costs are just to put it all together and then deliver shipments and then the distribution and all of that. So why not first check with us, with the company that's got an AI to see if people will even like what you put together, right? Run it by you guys. So thank you so much. Best of luck. Hang on, I'm going to talk to you off mic a little bit. But those of you guys listening to it, hopefully we just go to the blog, because it's kind of fun to read through some of that. And it's not that it's not deep in the jargon of trying to figure out, just very nicely written, explainers to just see just how sophisticated Gastrograph really is. Commend you, and best of luck, Jason.
Thank you.
For more episodes of Through the Noise, go to throughthenoise.us.